Good afternoon, Conference. Welcome to the 2013 Autumn Conference of the Liberal Democrats here in Glasgow. I'm Tim Farron, your chair for this session, Jeff Payne, my aide. It's going to be really hard work, this bit, because all we have to do is introduce the person who's going to formally introduce an open conference. Now, normally, if you've been to these things before, you'll know we have a civic dignitary who comes along and welcomes us to the place that we are occupying for the coming days. Normally it's somebody with a chain. Today it's someone with some real power. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you one of our most effective MPs, most effective ministers I have ever seen, and an absolutely superb, outstanding advert for our party. Would you welcome Joe Swinson, MP?
Well, thank you very much for that welcome, Tim, and hello, Conference. It has been a long time since we have met for an autumn conference in Scotland, certainly before my time, which is a shame, given Scotland's rich liberal tradition, from Adam Smith to Joe Grimmond, Roy Jenkins, David Steele, and of course, more recently, Ming Campbell and Charles Kennedy. But I suppose Federal Conference Committee is making up for it now that we're having two autumn conferences here in a row. So I give you a warm welcome to my city, vibrant, dynamic, and friendly Glasgow. I appreciate that for some of you, it may be your first time visiting Glasgow, or maybe the first time in a long time. So before getting stuck into the politics, I thought I would set out some of the highlights and give a few pointers on advice on perhaps some of the words and the delicacies you might experience during your time here. So first of all, well done for being here. There's been a few journalists in the Westminster Press Pack who have been grumbling about the distance. Now, from people who are quick to make accusations about the laziness of MPs, I find it slightly ironic to hear my regular weekly commute given as a reason for not attending an annual conference, but there you go. Secondly, please abandon whatever preconceptions you had about this city. When I left home to go and study down in London, I became used to a standard reaction when I said I was from Glasgow. Often there was surprise that someone could come from Glasgow and be more articulate than Rabsy Nesbitt. Industrial, dirty, rough were some of the words that people used. People, of course, who had never been. So I found myself effectively acting like an outpost of the Glasgow Tourist Information Office, encouraging my fellow American students to make that 45-minute detour on their inevitable trip to Edinburgh to take in the sights and delights of Glasgow too. Glasgow has a glittering past and a bright future. Not for nothing was Glasgow the second city of the empire, an industrious city with manufacturing expertise in shipbuilding and engineering. Glasgow became a very wealthy city, leading to the majestic Victorian architecture that you will see looking around the city today. Green spaces were prized with more parks and open spaces than any similar European city of the time. And then there was the wonderful feat of engineering in 1859 that drove cholera and typhoid from the city by constructing a 26-mile-long aqueduct from the clear waters of Loch Katrine to the reservoir in my hometown of Mulgai. Instead of any kind of pump mechanism, the water supply relied solely on gravity, dropping exactly 10 inches per mile and going straight through any hills that happened to be in the way. Glasgow, as we know, experienced industrial decline in the middle of the 20th century, perhaps the only silver lining being that that gorgeous Victorian stonemasonry was generally left intact instead of being demolished to make way for the progress of a 1960s concrete jungle. And since the 1980s, Glasgow has flourished, boosted by economic regeneration projects, coupled with big national events like the Garden Festival in 1988, which drew 4 million visitors, and being the European City of Culture in 1990. And I have very fond memories of my Halloween costume that year as Miss City of Culture. And no, my mother is not sharing the photos. Today, you'll find a confident city, brimming with culture. 20 minutes walk along the Clyde to the west, you'll find the newly opened and award-winning Riverside Museum, showcasing Glasgow's world-class transport collection, including an array of bicycles suspended from the ceiling. It's right up Norman Baker Street. And if you pop south, just across the river, you can visit the Science Museum, possibly best appreciated with a little person, especially to get you into the coveted under sevens only section. But in lieu of that, I'm sure Julian Huppert would be an enthusiastic companion. Or you could wander north, where you'll find Scotland's most popular free attraction, the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum, just a stone's throw from the historic university campus and the buzzing West End. Or head east into the city centre, where you find the Gallery of Modern Art and, of course, the best shopping in the UK outside of London. So that's your itinerary sorted for any of the debates you don't particularly fancy. What about sampling the local fare? Well, contrary to popular belief, it's not all deep-fried Mars bars and bottles of Buckfast. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen a deep-fried Mars bar in a chippy. But you will want to know that fish and chips in Scotland is commonly known as a fish supper. To enjoy the city's culinary delights, you could do worse than searching on 5pm.co.uk if you want offers for eating out in hundreds of restaurants across the city. And of course, it is just possible that some of you will pop in for a tipple at the Scotch Whisky Association's reception later on this evening at conference. Local whiskies to look out for are Auchentoshan and Glengoyne. That said, we all know Scotland's national drink is actually Iron Brew. And if sweet orange fizzy drinks are your thing, then stock up while you're here. A word of warning, however, from the Whip's office staff. If you see Alistair Carmichael drinking the stuff, it's a sure sign he's in a foul mood, or crab it, as we might say here. So to help you with further translation issues, I really would like to share some of the wonderfully expressive words that we have that may be appropriate for various conference situations. For example, drich. That's defined as a combination of dull, overcast, drizzly, cold, misty, miserable weather. At least 4 of these adjectives must apply before the weather can be considered truly drich. Now, it may be difficult to believe given the sunshine outside today, but I'm telling you, conference, 5 days in Glasgow in September, fair chance of at least one drich day. Carry a brolly. Secondly, blether, which means incessant, mainly inconsequential chatter. You may well find yourself having a wee blether in the conference bars of an evening. Then there's wheesht. It's the Scottish colloquial equivalent of the House of Commons speaker calling order. Hod your wheesht is one way of telling people to shut up. Useful for fringe meeting chairs to remember if the polite clinking of a teaspoon on a glass isn't quite enough to bring people to attention. And as you know, here in the conference hall, we like to have lively debates. So if there's lots of disagreement and a bit of a row, it might even be called a stushy. On the other hand, if a speech is particularly bold, brilliant, and impressive, then you might describe it as gallus. Now, far be it from me to suggest that alcohol might sometimes play a part in conference evening entertainment. I'm, of course, relishing a teetotal conference this year. But you might occasionally come across folk who've been to far too many of those fringes that say they have free refreshments. And you might say that they were steaming. And finally, if you're searching for just the right word to describe the vigour with which some of those fellow conference reps get stuck into the songs at the Glee Club, then I think saying they're gien at laldy would be a perfect description. So you're all set now to enjoy the week like a local. East Dunbartonshire, where I grew up and represent, is actually just outside the city boundary, but it's less than 15 minutes away by train, which you can put to the test if you fancy picking up a leaflet round from the Scottish Liberal Democrat stall in the exhibition area. It is a lovely place, and it feels really special to represent home. But in many ways, my constituency highlights starkly how Glasgow is also a tale of two cities. Life expectancy in East Dunbartonshire is the highest in Scotland. But right next door, the lowest life expectancy rates in the UK are in Glasgow. In fact, that railway line that you might jump on to come and deliver leaflets, that's actually a dividing line, with an 11-year difference in life expectancy between Bearsden on one side and Drumchapel on the other. 2 weeks ago, Glasgow was named as the city with the highest percentage of workless households of any area in the UK. Labour took their support in Scotland for granted for so long that they did little to combat the health inequality, income inequality, poverty and deprivation that many parts of Glasgow face. And that's why it's so important that we, Liberal Democrats, achieve our vision of a stronger economy and a fairer society. It's why we're cutting taxes for the low paid, increasing incentives to work, cracking down on payday lenders, and calling time on rogue employers who exploit and underpay their workers. And it's why I feel so angry that many of the other good things that we're doing in government don't reach people here because of the stubbornness of the SNP government in Scotland. When I see Simon Hughes welcoming the extra money to support the poorest pupils in his inner London schools, I wish pupils here also received pupil premium cash injections for their schools. When last week, 2-year-olds from the poorest homes in England started to benefit from 15 hours a week of free early years education, support that will go to 40% of the most hard-pressed families by next year, I was furious that here in Scotland, just 1% of 2-year-olds get this help. And when we celebrate 1 million extra apprenticeships being created south of the border, I think how much more we could be doing for Scotland's young people if Alex Salmond would follow Vince Cable's in making apprenticeships such a key priority. Now, it is right with devolution that these decisions are made in Scotland. But just because we can do something differently, it doesn't mean we always have to. Alex Salmond thinks that he has all the answers. But the truth is that different parts of the UK can learn from each other. In just over a year, people here in Scotland have a momentous decision to make. It'll be the most important vote that I've ever cast, and that's true for people of my parents' generation too. Because separation isn't a protest vote. It's a massive, life-changing decision that can't be undone. Scotland and the rest of the UK are stronger together economically, sharing the risks in the bad times and enjoying more opportunities when things go well. Through the EU and the United Nations, we can achieve more if the UK is united together than split apart. And 300 years of shared culture, heritage, and family ties should not be tossed lightly away. The vote will be decided here in Scotland, but the debate will rage across the entire UK. So, for those of you who live down south, I encourage you to join in. Whether it's campaigning here in Scotland or on the telephone, or engaging with Scottish friends and family in discussion about the benefits of the UK. The voice of the rest of the UK also making the positive case for Scotland to stay is an important one that needs to be heard. Next year, we'll gather here again in Glasgow. We'll have had European elections, exciting Commonwealth Games, the referendum, and in my case, a baby. I hope at that point, not only will my family be looking forward to sharing an exciting future together, but the UK family will be too. Enjoy conference, and as we say here, haste ye back.